be tied to the results of these experimental tests. We never voted for that. They have instituted ruinous unfunded mandates on the states and the local districts. They have connected these new standards to massive, intrusive data collection systems, data collection and data sharing. The standards themselves don't require that, but the entire setup, the entire scheme requires that. The executive order was a good step in the first direction, but we really need tight legislation to nail that down. The Common Core scheme essentially is elitism run amok, is what it is. It assumes that Georgia parents and Georgia teachers are incapable of educating our children without help from really smart people in Washington, whether they're in private organizations or in the U.S. Department of Education, as though those really smart people had done such a great job up to now. This new iteration of centralization and control, centralized control, will destroy whatever innovation we have in our education. Now, where did the problems in education come from? Well, you could spend months talking about that. I suggest they came from the centralization that started when the federal government started to creep into things and start dictating what we were going to do. I don't think the problems of centralization can be solved by more centralization. Why can't we be free to do what we want to with our education without having the strings of the federal government or a consortia of other states telling us what we can or can't do? Thank you.
Folks, I'm going to start, and I am Martha Reichroth. I am Deputy State Superintendent right now, work with the arenas of curriculum instruction, assessment, and accountability. Before I have served in this present job, I served for Governor Perdue as an accountability agency head, so I have been now working at the state level for about a decade, about 11 years actually. I want to start with, first of all, a plea to you, because I think our children in this state deserve for us to find some unification in the direction we're going to be taking. Just today at our State Board of Education meeting, we reacted, the State Board of Education reacted, and I believe Lisa Tennemore. Lisa, would you raise your hand? She is one of our State Board members. She was present with us, and they reacted to a direction from Governor Deal to take a look at these standards in a very formal way, to make sure that these standards were as every Georgian would want them to be. Standards that will help our teachers to define what a youngster needs to be competitive whenever they walk out the door of a high school, so they never get a door closed and they can go on to pursue whatever avenue of next post-secondary education they want to pursue. Whether it's the world of work, whether it's a technical college, whether it's a baccalaureate institution, the military, so that they're prepared. So today, the State Board put a process in place for a very, very specific introspection of the CCGPS, which are college and career ready Georgia performance standards, certainly infused for the Common Core. I want to tell you how that process worked in Georgia. It was 2003 when we first started working on the Georgia performance standards. As a high school principal, I spent 17 years in the principalship, and as a high school principal, I didn't use the state's curriculum very much. It was not rigorous enough, it was not challenging, it was not certainly complex enough to take what we thought as a faculty our students needed to take them to the next level. So in 2003, we began working on that curriculum. I was at the governor's office at that time, but worked very closely with the Department of Education. The Georgia performance standards were birthed for every subject, for every grade level. They were far more rigorous than anything we had ever known in this state. But we knew they still had problems. We were hearing it from our teachers. We had areas such as K-3 English language arts that needed to be strengthened. We needed writing standards strengthened. We needed to take a close look at where the mathematics content standards really should lie, especially as that middle schooler was transitioning into the high school. So in 2008, Governor Perdue and many of his Republican governors, quite honestly, folks, were working together to talk about, we're all working on this same work. Many of those states had indeed developed their own standards just like we had. But it was time to take that second look. So when the governors certainly got together, and I believe it was Governor Markell of Delaware, who was a Democrat, but Governor Perdue and Governor Markell got together, decided they would share this effort where states would come together and certainly talk about what are the commonalities that we need to look at in terms of our standards. And that's working with the Council of Chief State School Officers in this country, all the chiefs. At the time, that was Superintendent Cox, now it is Superintendent Barge. They were a great partner in that endeavor, and that's how Common Core really began to take shape. It was driven by governors. So what happened in Georgia, we worked for 2 years, literally working with others across this nation, teachers, board members, stakeholders, going to different kinds of convenings to really put those standards together. And in the result was the infusion of Common Core state standards into our Georgia Performance Standards. They were never a switch. We never threw our standards away and replaced them by Common Core. We used the Common Core to make ours better. And I wanted to tell you that story as we begin talking about this issue tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, and it is a privilege to be with you tonight and just to share our thoughts and on Common Core. And Senator Miller is a good friend of mine, and like a good friend who's gone astray, I'm on a mission to bring him back into the The issues of Common Core is as much about governance as it is about education. Historically, the arena of education has rested with the states, and it's been that way in the Constitution and under federal law. In fact, the United States Department of Education Organizational Act expressly states that the federal government does not have any direction, supervision over curriculum, program of instruction, which starts getting pretty close to standards, or administration of schools. And Georgia has operated under that. And just as Dr. Reichert said, we've set our standards. And in fact, in 2008, we had a fairly complete review of our standards. And those standards were very good. The Fordham Institute reviewed those standards and said that these standards were that Georgia was one of 12 states that had standards as good as or better than the Common Core standards. And they specifically went into great detail pointing out those areas where Georgia's standards were far superior. So that begs the question, why do you go backwards? But go backwards and change we did, and these Common Core standards, in essence, we changed our governance, and now the standards weren't determined here in Georgia, but they were determined by a consortium of states, which means that our voice was diluted, working with nonprofits funded by large corporations that have an interest in this, and working with federal money, and the program, the compliance with these standards were to be under the oversight of the United States Department of Education. And when we signed up for that grant, the terms of the conditions of those standards could not be changed. We were allowed to add 15% to those standards, but we couldn't change it. So in essence, we traded our ability to come in and adjust a standard that wasn't working, that needs work, to having to work through a consortium of states to get their permission to change it if we needed to change it. That's a loss of a tremendous amount of control. But we're told, well, this was state-led because the Governors Association signed us up for this. Well, what is the National Governors Association? It's a trade organization. It's not subject to open records laws. We don't even know who the members are. We don't know what the vote was. We don't know what deliberations occurred. We don't know what information was processed. Because it's not open and transparent like our system of government that we have now. We know what goes on in our government because we have laws that require that. And because of that, there are certain issues that have come up. And these have been apparent to us. We've had to withdraw from the testing component, the PARC, for two reasons. One, because of the funding. But the other reason that was articulated was because we did not have control over what would be on that test. And control is an important issue. Secondly, we know that the reviews were rushed. I have a Department of Education study that was put out to teachers and parents online. And perhaps one of the most important questions that was asked which is, are these standards clear? Do they cover key content? And are they appropriately rigorous? In math from kindergarten through 8th grade, over 60% of the respondents said no, they did not meet those requirements. And the high school standards fared just as well. In some cases, 100% disagreement that those standards met those requirements. And now we have had those opinions confirmed, opinions of Georgia teachers and Georgia parents confirmed by some university professors who have reviewed the standards and said, yes, you're right. The former Georgia standards were better. So we've taken a step back. And really the question now is, going forward, will Georgia retain the right to control its standards so that we will have the flexibility to change what doesn't work and the ability to innovate? Thank you.
Well, thank you, all of you. We are entering the section where I will be asking several questions. And again, these questions were delivered to the panelists about a week ago, and so they don't know who's going to be asked what. But
We never received it. But it's okay.
It's okay, it's okay.
Just for the record.
well, mine had the answers on them, so I can't give those to you. No, I'm sorry, that's not true.
I can give him my answer.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Reichrath, I'd like to start with you. One of my questions was, and I almost am ashamed to ask this. I'm not even sure I quite understand what difference it will make in the classroom if we adopt these standards versus if we don't adopt them. And particularly, I wonder about things like, will the adoption of the standards be of greater benefit to children who are generally of higher academic ability or lower academic ability? Will the adoption of the standards differentially affect schools, like be more helpful to schools and children in higher performing districts already, or will they advantage or move forward more quickly schools in lower performing districts? And will they have an effect on failing schools?
Christine, would you just give me the first part of the question again?
Okay.
Several.
What difference will it actually make to the schools in the classroom if the Common Core is adopted versus not? And the difference for high-performing versus low-performing students?
We got it, thank you.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I was responding to that first part because it sort of hit a nerve with me. One of the concerns, and we have certainly expressed this to our legislative partners at the General Assembly as we are deliberating what these next steps would be, and to our state board members. In fact, I said it today. One of my greatest concerns is for the teachers of our state and for the principals of our state who have been certainly in a very dedicated effort in the implementation of standards, whether they be GPS standards or the infused CCGPS